Well, good morning, everybody. We'll start the meeting with your forbearance this morning, just with the screens while we try to get them in sync for us. So welcome, everybody, to our meeting. Just reminding everybody about the live streaming, and please, your mobile phones in front of you to one side. And we will have a break so that you can clear your messages. And this morning I ask Councillor Sturt if you would like to open our meeting, please, with the council prayer.
Kia ora, e te atua kaharawa, ko koe te tohu rangatira te tohu mataranga. Mana ki tia mai mātou, a pongo e tēnei rā, e mahi nei e a mātou mahi, o te painga o nā tangata, o te kaunihira o Rotorua. Takoa mai kia tau te rangamari e, ke rongo I a mātou I nā wā katoa. Ko ihua karaiti, hoki te mātou, āriki, Amen. Almighty God, who alone is the leader of all mankind and the fountain of all knowledge, send thy blessing upon us, your servants, this day, as we strive to do all things good for the betterment of the people of the Rotorua district. May we be tolerant in ourselves at all times through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen.
And now item 2, calling for any apologies. I have one for lateness from Councillor Maxwell. He's giving a presentation, a cultural presentation, will arrive as soon as that's finished. I so move that. Thank you. There are no further apologies. All those in favour, please say aye. Contrary? Carried. And now any declarations of interest? Here to be none. Any urgent items not on the agenda? Are there any urgent items? Councillor Bentley.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. It is my privilege to be able to present to Council today a petition for the requesting Council reconsider and cease the lakefront redevelopment.
Thank you, Councillor Bentley. Look, I apologise to you. Well, I'm not apologising at all. Councillors should know the standing orders, 16.1. Petitions must be sent to the Chief Executive at least 5 working days before the meeting at which the petition is presented. So I cannot accept the petition, but it can come. You can notify, and it can come if it's duly sent to the Chief Executive 5 days before the next meeting. Thank you. Are there any other urgent items not on the agenda? There appear to be none. We move on. Yes.
I have ask a question and just find out from Councillor Bentley how many people have signed the petition and how many people refused to sign it.
I think we should receive petitions appropriately, and then all of the information will come, I'm sure, with the presentation at the next meeting. It's just a good learning to know the correct way to table petitions. We move now to the confirmation of council minutes held on the 27th of September, page 7 in your order paper. Do I have a mover and a seconder that the minutes of the council meeting on the 27th? Thank you. Moved Councillor Gould, seconded Councillor Kent. Are there any corrections? Councillor Sturt?
I just want to note under 4, and should be noted in today's minutes, my tabling of the review of the racing industry. A submission was forwarded in a timely fashion after all councillors were forwarded a copy for approval and comment. So I thank you, Your Worship, and the Chief Executive for that.
Thank you, and thank you, Councillor Kent. I think you had some part in putting that submission together, collating all aspects from us. Thank you for that. So I will put the motion to the vote that the minutes of the council meeting 27th of September be confirmed as a true and accurate record. All those in favour, please say aye. Contrary? Carried. recommendations from other committees, that's page 14, and we'll take them individually. The first is a mover and a seconder that the recommendation from other committees be received. Councillor Rotorua Tate, seconded Councillor Donaldson. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Contrary, carried. The first is that the recommendation from the Strategy, Policy and Finance Committee meeting held on the 11th of October be adopted. Recommendation 1, the Men's Shed, Rotorua, new lease on Pererika Street, that council approved the new lease to the Men's Shed, Rotorua on Pererika Street for a period of 20 years. Of a mover, Councillor Donaldson, seconded Councillor Gould. The motion is open for discussion. Councillor Sturt.
I think this motion will be received with considerable glee by the Men's Shed. For a number of years they've been trying to find a new home, and I think it's totally appropriate with the approval and consultation with Ngāti Whakaue that the reserve there for a period of 20 years is suitable for them, and I wish them well in their endeavours.
Thank you. Is there any other comment or clarification? No? All those in favour? Put the motion to the vote. Aye. Contrary? Carried. And they will be pleased about that. That really settles something that was outstanding from when we first came in 2013. I ask for a mover and a seconder for the motion recommendation 2 that the Rotorua Lakes Water Sports Trust lease extension on the Lakefront Reserve, that council extend the lease to the Rotorua Lakes Water Sports Trust on Lakefront Reserve for a period of 20 years from the 1st of August 2018. Moved Councillor Hunt, seconded Councillor Gould. Is there any discussion?
Madam Chair, I'd just like to add that I think that this is a very good result for the Water Sports Trust. They are going to be one of the key tenants down there, and I think that with the developments coming up, that their ability to grow and strengthen that facility is quite timely.
Very timely. Councillor Sturt.
One of the things I'm pleased about with the fact that we have extended this lease is the opportunity to involve other water sports like Wakaama have been wanting to find a home, and I believe that that is an integral part of the lakefront development, that Wakaama be accommodated by the Rotorua Lakes Water Sport Trust, and I believe they've welcomed them with open arms, and the infrastructure required to create exciting events at that lakefront for Rotorua, and Councillor Hunt is to be encouraged on the working party for the lakefront development to ensure that that does come to pass. Thank you.
I'm going to put that motion. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Contrary? Carried. And yes, it is very welcome for them. There's been considerable work. Could I thank the staff that have worked with the operators and with the trust to make sure that their aspirations are met, and well done to the staff. That was quite substantial and had to come back to the Reserves Committee as well, so well done. A mover and a seconder now for recommendation 3, the boundary point of sale, point of supply, backflow prevention. They've all got the paper? The amended, supplementary. That I will read it, that the proposed boundary backflow into the main water supply network prevention policy be adopted. This is quite technical. That it be noted that the installation of each backflow preventer be paid for directly by the property owner, with the cost of annual testing being funded through targeted rates for connections requiring backflow prevention devices, and that funding for preliminary investigation and ongoing monitoring will be funded by existing budgets, while the cost of installation will be incorporated into the 2019-20 FY of financial year through the user pays principle. I thought it was a backflow component. Right. This motion, do I have a mover to accept? Thank you. Seconder, Councillor Sturt. Is there any further discussion, Councillor Kent?
Thank you, Your Worship. I restate my opposition to the requirement for annual testing of backflow prevention devices. That is ludicrous in the extreme in the vast majority of cases. I have said so at the committee. I state it again, and I will be voting against this motion for that reason.
And you certainly did say that at the committee. Councillor Sturt?
I have some sympathy with where Councillor Kent's coming from. Having had a lifestyle block, we had backflow preventers, plus we had restrictors on the Kaharoa water supply, and most of them were self-managing. The issue I've got with number 2 of the recommendation is, and I wonder if Stavros could, how widespread is this problem? Is it just a rural problem, or is it an urban problem? Because certainly I don't want to see, for want of a better analogy, people in white coats marching onto people's properties to say you need a backflow preventer, and the cost which the recommendation states must be paid directly by the property owner. So is there an opportunity for the person to appeal the directive? And what sort of background information does the property owner have, or does council have, to support the need for these? So first question is...
Question that was asked in committee.
No,
I do recall
I've thought about it
considerable
since.
discussion.
I've thought about it since as to how widespread the problem is.
Stavros, could you answer the question, please?
Thank you, Morena Councillors, through you, Your Worship. As I have advised the committee, there are currently in operation somewhere in the region of 2,000 to 2,500 backflow, prevention devices in existence. We anticipate there would be probably somewhere around another 600. The need for this is dictated by the actual use of the premise and the risk that resides inside the premise. So as the report says, that an investigation takes place when the risk is identified of such level that requires backflow prevention. A discussion would take place with the property owner, and if the property owner has other means of managing that risk, and obviously will be open and receptive to that. The main emphasis of these reports and this recommendation is for us actually to put a routine and manageable practice as required by the Building Act, which dictates an annual minimum testing, and also to make sure that where we identify a risk, we have active measures to manage that risk. Property owners will have an opportunity to discuss and propose alternative ways if they so wish.
So that answers your question. Councillor Donaldson?
Yeah, not a question, a comment as the mover, Your Worship. I think Councillor Sturt's question was a good one because it clarifies the quantum of the properties affected. So less than 10% of rateable properties, or around 10% of rateable properties, and risk has to be identified before the backflow preventer is put in place. The rest of it is down to the Building Act, and I fully support the motion.
You have a question, Councillor Bentley?
I do have a question, thank you, Madam Mayor, for Stavros actually, is with these annual inspections or however often they deem it necessary to inspect these backflow devices, what is the anticipated cost to the property owner, please?
Stavros?
Thank you, Councillor Bentley. Well, I can't give you the exact figure at this point in time, but obviously it depends on the there's an inspection fee, and there would be a requirement to do work. And we have not established that yet, and we will do that, as part and parcel of the investigation, identifying the policy. As you said, we will spend the next few months doing the investigations, setting up the parameters of that of those costs, and notifying the affected parties.
Thank you, and it will be notified back to the appropriate committee of council, Stavros, as part of a policy development. Councillor Rotorua.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Is it actually a requirement of the Building Act that there is an annual inspection, or is it just at the discretion of council? I wasn't aware that it was actually a requirement of the Building Act, because I agree with Councillor Kent. I think it's rather ridiculous to have an annual inspection, and self-monitoring to me would be sufficient. However, if it is a requirement of the Act, and I'm not quite sure if that is the case. Thank you.
Could you answer that?
Yes, it is part of the a statutory requirement to do a minimum annual testing. And may I say, Your Worship, that preemptive, regular risk management inspections is part and parcel of our entire infrastructure strategy. A significant portion of our infrastructure strategy is dedicated to preemptive risk management inspections, and issue identification.
Thank you. And I think if I add that at discussion at the meeting, and I pointed out that central government is looking at a water regulator. And if we don't do what is incumbent upon us as a council to ensure a safe supply, then central government could well move, because they don't have the confidence that we can do it appropriate at a TLA level. And that has been pointed out at the water forums that are being held. Councillor Kent.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just picking up on Mr Michael's comment there, and advice to Councillor Rotorua Tate. Could he please advise me where in the Building Act the evidence is that supports his statement he just made, that it is required under legislation to have annual testing? It's not in the Building Act as far as I'm concerned.
Well, Stavros, if you don't have it, if you could bring it back to council. I don't know if you've got that at your fingertips.
I don't have it with me, Your Worship, but more than happy to email to all elected members.
Thank you. Councillor Gould.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Are the numbers still the same as we revised at the committee meeting a couple of weeks ago on property owners?
Give us the breakdown of the numbers, and then was affirmed by Councillor Donaldson. Yes. Yes, we've heard it. Thank you. Councillor Donaldson.
Thank you, Worship. If I could just comment on the actual report in the SPNF, the last SPNF meeting. The report states that under the Building Act 2004, there's a requirement for non-residential buildings to have annually renewable building warrant of fitness, which ensures that specified systems installed within the building, which includes black flow prevention devices, are performing as they should. So that's the legislation that
Thank you for that
Mr Michael's talking about.
Thank you.
Your Worship, that does not include residential, and what we're putting forward here does.
Well, I think we've heard from Stavros that he'll bring the relevant legislation that you're concerned about too. So I'm going to put the motion to the vote of recommendation 3. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Contrary? Okay, we'll record your vote against, Councillor Kent. The motion is passed. The next item of business, and welcome back, Councillor Kumar. Nice to have you at the table. The hearing panel recommendation proposed amendments to the lakefront section of the Rotorua Township's Reserve Management Plan, page 15 in your order paper. Do I have a mover and a seconder to receive the report? Hearing panel recommendations, proposed amendments to the lakefront section of the Rotorua Township's Reserve Management Plan 2006 be received. Thank you. Seconded, Councillor Rotorua Tate. All those in favour, please say aye. Contrary? Carried. And now we'll have Stephanie is coming forward, and Henry, thank you. to answer any of your questions about the amendments proposed. Are there any questions? Councillor Kent.
Thank you, Your Worship. There is an introduction of a new clause here, 7.2.6.8.20. In conjunction with key stakeholders, provision will be made within the proposed redevelopment of the reserve for waka-ama and paddle sports, including infrastructure, to attract and support events. My question is, this isn't the right place for statements concerning the development of the waterfront. This is a reserve management plan. It should permit them. It should not indicate that council is going to provide them. So the wording is not right. It needs to be changed.
Henry, do you want to speak to that? It's the permissible activity.
Madam Chair, I might actually pass it on to Councillor Hunt, just as the Chair of the Hearings Committee, to outline the logic for it.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'd just start, first of all, by saying it was a very good hearing process we had in the submitters. There was some slight confusion for many of the submitters that they thought they were submitting on the lakefront development plan, not the reserve management plan. And that was something that it was needed to be made clear that the decisions made by the committee related specifically to that. It was the waka-ama and paddle sports. We had quite a significant discussion and submissions on this particular issue, and we have essentially written that. And yes, I hear what Councillor Kent has said, that the wording may well not fit within many of the policies we have, but we felt that it was important to establish the relationships, particularly with tangata whenua, and that is why we have specifically said that in conjunction with the key stakeholders, provision will be made in that to establish that that is a key part of this reserve management plan moving forward, because it is working with the gifted lands, and that this was an important thing to establish in this policy.
So that was a recommendation from the committee?
It was, and it came out from the submission, strongly from the submission process. And I have to say that the committee spent about twice as long at least debating and getting to the end of this policy than initially everyone thought. And that's because we really chewed it over. We debated quite strongly which bits should be in and which bits didn't belong, and sought to clearly articulate in a way that would work for all parties submitting the intent of the reserve management plan.
Councillor Kent, you no doubt were hearing the submissions too, were you?
No, Your Worship, I wasn't part of the committee that was hearing, otherwise I would have raised this at the time. Yeah. I'm just going to make a suggestion. What we've got here is a statement that says, in conjunction with key stakeholders, provision will be made, including infrastructure, right? That infers that council will be going ahead and providing that infrastructure. I'm going to suggest that the word including is changed to facilitating, which then takes away the requirement for council to do it, other than enabling it to happen, which is what should be in the management plan.
Yeah. So you propose that amendment, Councillor Hunt. Does that fit with your lengthy discussion?
It does actually, right. And certainly the panel members that are here today have given their nods in agreement. I think that's an appropriate amendment, and I thank Councillor Kemp for highlighting that issue for us.
Thank you. Good process. So you're moving the amendment to include the word facilitating. Councillor Stewart. Proposed, Councillor Kent, seconded, Councillor Stewart. Is there any more discussion on that? Yes, Councillor Stewart.
My question was, sorry, I was part of the lengthy debate because with my hat of sport and recreation, if we didn't have reference to it in there in the long term, we could not, if they wanted separate facilities, we could not give them a lease because the reserves management plan did not allow for that. it allows for the Lakes Water Trust, but if we didn't specifically name it, it couldn't be incorporated. So that's why it had to be specifically named with that new clause. But I agree with Councillor Kent. By putting the word in facilitating means that's not a direction that we're going to provide the facilities. They will work with the Lakes Water Trust or come up with additions to their facilities down there for that to happen.
So it's an enabling.
It's an enabling situation.
Councillor Kent?
The reference you're looking for up there is 7.2.6.8.20, which should be on the end there. Otherwise, we're going to replace every occurrence of including right throughout the document.
It's coming. Could you repeat it?
7.2.
Yep. 0.6.
0.6.
0.8.
0.8.20.
Thank you. Well,
Because on page 21, the staff recommendation was to amend objective 7.2.6.7.3 to include the Te Tawa Trust. So your amendment fits in perfectly with that situation.
so this is the finessing of the recommendations. Thank you. Are there any more questions? Councillor Tapsell?
Thank you, Your Worship, and sorry, it's not quite a question, but I just wanted to highlight that one of the inclusions in here was to ensure that all development and use of the reserve protects and enhances the mauri of Te Rotorua Kahumata Moimoi, Lake Rotorua and its natural environment, and just how pleased I was to see that come through actually as a submission, because although it was on the back of all of our minds and almost a given, it was actually through that submission process that we made sure that we implemented this and put it in place so that it's very clear for future generations. So I just want to also thank all the submitters that came as well, and our staff that done an excellent job in summarising that. Thank you very much.
Councillor Rotorua.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I do have a question, if I may, put to Councillor Hunt, and it's because of the comment that Councillor Hunt made. Councillor Hunt, you did say that there was some submitters came along and there was some confusion about whether they were submitting on the lakefront development or indeed on the reserves management, and I just wondered, did they not read it right? You know, people had put some effort into preparing a submission, and so what was the confusion? Was it just that we hadn't advertised well enough, or was the confusion on their part, or how did that happen? And I hope it wasn't too many people.
Could I, before Councillor Hunt answers you, we were a little concerned about a column that went in a Grey Power magazine, which was inviting people to come and submit. And I think that caused some confusion, and then they thought they were coming genuinely to submit on the development rather than on the Rotorua Township's Reserve Management Plan.
Right, yes.
But Karen, Councillor Hunt, you may have picked that up too.
Yes, I did, and I think there was some concern because the first submitter I interrupted and had to guide them gently to say, well, actually, that's out of scope for this, and you have 10 minutes, and if you present something out of scope, then the committee has no ability to make any decisions on what you're saying. The feedback I got from further submitters who also came in under that illusion that they were submitting on the development plan said actually after they'd read the boards out in the Galleria and had heard the discussion, that actually they were really happy with the process, and there were other submitters who were fully conversant with the fact that it was the reserve management plan they were submitting on, and that's what they had put their written and presented to that day. So it was a little bit of misinformation in the community that caused that issue.
Councillor Tapsell?
Thank you, Worship, and just quickly to reassure the councillors, staff have been working behind the scenes to make sure that all the information is very easy to read. It's just the nature of having two very similar titles, so I know that they've been doing work with not only the advertising but also on the website to making sure when people look for things and search for things, they're finding what they want first. So just to reassure other councillors.
Councillor Donaldson.
And just the other part, through you, Madam Chair, of Councillor Rotorua Tate's question, there were only 8 submitters, and I don't think they all wanted to be heard either. It's only 7 wanted to be heard.
Just in conclusion, a vote of thanks to Councillor Hunt for her chairmanship of that hearing. I've never been on a hearing before in all the years I've been here, and I felt a very smooth process with a chair who explained everything to every submitter and kept us on the hearings panel fully informed of where we were heading. Thank you, Councillor Hunt.
Thank you. Councillor Maxwell.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Aroha, my apologies for lateness. The question I have is on page 21. I see I'm pleased that the Te Arawa Waka Taua Trust is being acknowledged. But can you give me an update? There have been a committee that were under chair of Mr. Morrison, I think was one, but the current people in that on it, are we needing to have some replacements on there because some have passed on since then?
Different issue.
It's a different issue. We're really looking at the amendments to the reserve management plan, not the membership of trusts.
Okay.
If we could deal with that differently.
Okay, I can get that another time.
Thank you. I'm now going to put the motion as amended. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Contrary? Carried. We move now to the staff reports. Thank you very much, Henry and Stephanie. Recommendation 1, adoption of Council's annual report for the year end 30th of June 2018. Do I have a mover? Thank you, Councillor Rotorua Tate, and a seconder for that the report, adoption of Council's annual report for the year ended 30th of June 2018 be accepted. Seconded, Councillor Donaldson. All those in favour, please say aye. Contrary? Carried. Now, well, we've got... set the scene, Steve. Yes? You're going to set the scene. Chief Executive.
Tēnā koutou katoa, morena koutou. I've got the job of just setting the scene for this annual report. It's a usual process, a regular event that we look at every year. This year, though, is anything but regular or normal, in that it actually represents a large move forward for both our community and our organisation. The first aspect that will be covered in the presentation is the nature of some of the project work this organisation has undertaken in that period. Whilst many of the projects are multi-year projects, they do represent an investment in our community of approximately $190 million. So that is new community infrastructure projects. Of that investment, $46 million is funded through council. So in other words, a large spend is occurring in these projects, which is actually significantly resulting from partnership investment. Another aspect that has actually been a feature of the last 12 months. If I turn to business as usual activity, it's again anything but. We've been experiencing growth. This has driven a large increase in consents, a large increase in complicated, quite significant scaled multiple subdivisions, which are taking increased time and are proving sometimes challenging, but nevertheless represent a significant investment for our community. We've driven an LTP, a spatial plan, and we've at the same time replaced or are currently replacing our core financial system. So all of these things represent in their own right significant challenges for the organisation. Lastly, if that's not enough, we've actually been facing a number of broader challenges which we've had to respond to. We've had 3 significant community emergencies. These have meant that many residents have been, in some cases, displaced from their homes, and there's been significant damage to infrastructure. Even today, we're still actually looking to cope with getting people back into their homes and also repairing the infrastructure damage. At the same time, we've responded to 300 media requests over the year, in some 90-odd Lagoima requests. So the organisation's been busy. So what we'd like to do today is, rather than just walk straight through into the financials, we'd just like to take you through a high-level overview of some of the details of what has the organisation actually completed, what's actually occurred over the 12-month period. And so for that, I'd like to pass to Una.
Morena, good morning everybody and welcome.
Morena.
So what we're looking at today is our year in review, Te Tau Kaua Hipa. And I'm just going to sort of do a little bit of a look back, almost where did we start this financial year off from, and then lead us through some of the highlights and stuff that have happened during the year. And then I'll hand over to Thomas, who will take us through where we've ended up. So the question is, where did we begin? So the annual report reflects back on the financial year 17-18. And just to put that all in context, it's year 3 of the long-term plan that was 2015 to 2025. From that, the elections in October 2016 happened, and from there we launched straight into looking at a Vision 2030 refresh. Just to refresh our minds there, about that refresh really focused on the strengths and opportunities of our community, and that's what we took through into creating the annual plan for 17-18. During that time as well, the Lakes and the Rural Community Board, along with our Te Tātou members, began their journey and becoming part of our working in collaboration together and sitting at the table and being part of that decision making. The result was the creation and adoption of the annual plan 17-18, so year 3. So what did we commit to in that plan? And it goes back to re-looking at the focus of the strengths and the opportunities. And here I've just got a couple of snapshots direct from the annual plan itself, just to remind ourselves about the big moves and the key projects that were in and that we had committed to in the annual plan. Now, all of these projects, as Jeff has already described, are transformational projects that we've made a committed effort to progressing and that will see transformational change. And we've worked upon all of these projects and they've been crystallised and defined throughout the year. And all of them have worked in strong partnerships to really progress these projects. Doing all of that was also done within a financial framework, and that was around revenue of 121 million, an operating expenditure of 107.5 million, and a capital investment of 47 million, being made up of 22.5 million in levels of service projects and 24.5 million in renewals. And to do all of that, we had a commitment to increase our borrowings by 7.4 million. So what have we achieved during the year? Now, I've got some pictures and some snapshots of all of the projects and pieces of work that have been undertaken through the year. There is quite a few slides here, and I'm not going to go into any detail on a lot of them, but hope to just sort of click through and we may just sort of pick up on one or two of them. This is more just to refresh our memories of everything that's happened throughout the year. The spatial plan, and my colleagues next to me may jump in as well from time to time if they've got anything they wish to highlight on the areas. Te Manawa opened. Te Akamuri opened. We signed the Housing Accord and we were recognised as a medium growth district. We got the first round of provincial growth funding of $811,000, and that was granted to us to complete the business case and the detailed design for the lakefront and the Whakarewa forest developments. So we've continued work on the lakefront development plans, the business case and detailed design, and the same with the forest developments. The museum redevelopment, detailed seismic assessments have been undertaken to understand the quantum of work required to strengthen the building. The museum also began its operations beyond the wall, looking at innovative ways of delivering the services during its closure. And there's been ongoing work to secure the funding needed to complete the reopening of that iconic building. There's been huge leaps forward in working with NZTA, and there's been progress on the design and consultation around Sala Street to Old Taupo Road and the Sala Street work to Tarawera Road. The Aquatic Centre. Management for the Aquatic Centre has changed hands, and we've made a commitment to future investment in that. And there's a couple of pictures there, one in particular of a staff member in their new uniforms. Rotoiti Rotomā has progressed. Images there of actually showing the network and the pipeline, and for those of you who have been up to the site on a rather wet and woolly day, you will have seen progress that's happening there. Shimpack, the seismic assessments have been completed and those concept designs have been created. Rotorua Reorua kicked off our bilingual Rotorua journey, and as an organisation we've been fully committed to that as well. And you'll notice we've got a couple of pictures there of the mayor in Te Taru, you're sitting over there, of the bilingual playground and of our entranceway signs greeting everybody into Rotorua. And we've made investment into our sports facilities funding, and in particular all the work that's happened in the netball courts. And this is just a final slide, just an infographic there really, just at a really high level to capture some further of the highlights and that have happened throughout the year.
Run out of batteries.
It's died. Carol, can you move it on? It stopped working on me. So those were some images, and I have whipped through them relatively quickly, but they do show all of the things that have been achieved. Now, all of that has been undertaken by working in a different way, and you'll remember we're doing this through the way that we engage with our community, and some really good examples of that have been the engagement through the spatial plan, and remember the World Cafe, and also through the long-term plan work and the engagement there. But all of these projects and all of our work and work programs and business as usual is done in a partnering framework. And you can see up there, I've just grabbed a couple of snapshots of just some, this is not all, of some of the partners that we're working really closely with in order to progress work for our district. Jeff has already alluded to this slide, so all of that work that's been undertaken by working in a different way has a spin-off and a flow-on into the next sort of 3 to 5 years of our work program. Council's investment going forward of $40 million is being conceived sort of partnering funding of $193 million into our district for the future. My clicker's not working on me. So one of the areas that we can use to actually look at our service levels and whether we're delivering services in the manner that our community expects of us is by setting some KPIs. Now for this particular year, we had 76 measures within the annual plan that we were measuring, and you can see up there that we've had 59% of those measures have been achieved. Those targets sit across 17 activity areas, and they're listed up there. I'm just going to look to my right because I've got a few comments that we'd like to make on some of those performance areas.
So thank you and good morning, councillors. I might just skip ahead first of all and come back to that. So just a reminder of the challenges that we did face. So obviously Una has outlined all the good work that council has done, but as you know, we have also faced some challenges. So we did have 2 significant flood events during the year, as well as one near the end of the previous financial year that the organisation and the community has had to cope with. The aquatic centre management and the work that went into that. We were exposed to higher electricity pricing due to the weather events and also the high usage as a result of those events. Night shelter and homelessness was a particular topic that bubbled up during the year that the community asked this organisation to help respond on their behalf, and so resources did go into that to help work through that. The significant number of Lagoima requests that we face, the PC10 issues that we're working with the regional council with regards to ensuring those land use changes are for the benefit of both the community and also the environment. The landfill faced an abatement notice, one as a result of the flood event that took place, but also it's experienced high volumes with regards to the amount of waste going there. The construction industry, you've seen in the newspaper, as it's shrunk, as firms have failed, has also put pressure on our organisation to get good quality contractors in the time that we need, and also with the price expectation that we have. And of course Mudtopia. So we did also have an event whereby we tried to do something different for the community in New Zealand, and unfortunately it didn't work out as well as intended. So I think if you take those challenges and all the work, and then we come back to our performance measures, I think some of those are probably a reflection of why some of those performance measures haven't been met. Bearing in mind as well that these performance measures were set 3 years ago as part of the LTP. So if you look at the Rotorua Museum, obviously there were a number of measures that couldn't be achieved because the building wasn't opened. So it's no surprise there that 2 of the 4 measures weren't achieved. The aquatic centre, the discussion and the interaction with the community at the time around the awarding of the external contract for the management of it obviously did have an impact on the levels of satisfaction at the time of the survey. And since the survey and these measures have been done, we're now seeing a good improvement back in the levels of satisfaction of the aquatic centre with CLM now at the helm of that. Governance, probably a reflection of the changing way that the world works with regards to social media and how we engage with our community and how we measure levels of satisfaction. The measures are still done by an old phone survey, and again, it's just one of those things that we're working on and of trying to engage better with our community, make them more aware of what we're doing, and also giving them the opportunity to give feedback in different ways other than just obviously formal submission processes. Open spaces, it's a reflection of the toilets probably, and the need to revamp and improve the grade of some of our public amenities, and as you know, we're on a program to improve those in the coming years as well. And waste management, with regards to the abatement notice, the high volumes of household waste in particular, and as well as a small decline in the number of green waste going. And so that's a reflection there. So again, where we haven't performed, those I've highlighted, are all key areas of where this organisation and the community has faced challenges. So from a financial perspective, how did we end up? So first of all, we do have an audit opinion. It is an unmodified audit opinion, so it effectively says that our financial statements are a true and fair representation of the year and our financial position at the 30th of June 2018. Unfortunately, our audit director and manager are still working on other clients and have not been able to attend this meeting, but they will be attending the Audit and Risk Committee meeting on November the 19th, I understand. So revenue-wise, revenue, council collected a total of 120.4 million. You can see there with regards to the percentage splits of where it came from. By far, the majority of it did come from our rates revenue. Our revenue was slightly down on budget, wasn't far off, but was impacted quite significantly with regards to the timing of capital projects and also the timing of those subsidies that we would have received. So, as an example, We were expecting about $5 million from the Ministry of Health for Roto Iti Rotomā, but because of the timing of that project, that will now be received this financial year and not last financial year. And so where there is a difference there, that's where the majority of the variance sits on the revenue side. Where the money was spent, where we spent our money. So this did end up over budget, and it's probably no surprise with regards to the challenges that we talked about previously and the impact that they did have on our financial result. Obviously, the flooding and the repairs to our infrastructure impacted this. The electricity pricing impacted this significantly. The landfill, the construction, and obviously the Mudtopia event had a negative impact on our finances as well. How does it compare to previous year when we put it all together? I think if we show we're on a trend of heading in the right direction with regards to our end of year operating surpluses that bring everything together, as well as asset impairments and non-cash write-downs. So unfortunately we did end with a $1.6 million deficit. Obviously we were working towards ending up with a surplus, but because in particular the cost pressures that did come on the organisation, we were not able to achieve that and ended up with a small operating deficit. With regards to the capital investment, as you can see there, this has by far been the biggest year that the council has had for quite some time. So obviously back in 14-15 we were constrained. We were looking at managing our finances and getting on top of those sorts of things and understanding where the pressure points were. And since then, in particular, the 2017 year and 2018 year, we have seen a significant reinvestment into our infrastructure. So by far and wide, the majority of that $51 million is, while it has come in over budget, that has been a representation of the need for us to invest into our infrastructure. So part of that overspend is the timing of the eyesight completion from one year to the other. Also the library project, which was budgeted to be completed in the previous financial year, had a bit of a tail and a lag into this year. The civic centre, with regards to once we pulled away some of the hoardings and seeing what was underneath, the services needed significant replacement. The sports drome, many of you will recall how the sports drome looked to the EEC, how those facilities meant for pretty much Rotorua basketball, and those that have attended now have probably seen the significant investment and probably the joys on the kids' faces that facility has now been brought to the level that probably our community expects. And even Waipa. So Waipa example was unbudgeted, worked with the Rotorua Energy Charitable Trust, did the road realignment, and have seen a significant safety improvement, but also an amenity improvement for our community and obviously our visitors. And so all those, with a combination of a significant investment into the renewal of our infrastructure, which sometimes we do forget about, by far over half of that is an reinvestment into roading renewals, stormwater renewals, water network renewals, those sorts of elements. So it was by far a significant year. I'll just skip past this one again. Unfortunately though, what it did mean was that in a year that we anticipated borrowing $7.4 million, we actually ended up borrowing 21 million, and so it's a combination of, if I was to look at it, the less cash flows from our operations as we experienced more expense as a result of those challenges that we faced. The timing of the capital subsidies, which are obviously now going to fall within this year, and as well as that little bit of additional expenditure with regards to the need to keep investing into our infrastructure. And so therefore that is where we've ended the year. So with that, any questions, councillors?
Kent?
Thank you, Your Worship, through you. I must admit I find it exceedingly difficult to try and go through this document on Stella, and if not virtually impossible. Part of the reason being, for example, that all the pages seem to be totally out of kilter and the references in the index don't actually point to the right pages at this stage. However,
answer to that, because I called for a hard copy and then I was reminded that we go through this process today. Una, do you want to speak to that? Because others might be feeling the same.
Yes, apologies that it is a difficult read on Stella, and I admit. However, we put it on Stella to give you an idea and a feel for what the report looks like and what it is saying. However, when we put that up on Stella for you, we're still going through the audit process. Since that version was posted onto Stella for your reference, the report itself has probably been turned over and updated at least 4 or 5 times. So in order to make sure that when you get the final copy, it is the copy, we aim to provide that to you in a hard copy version once we've received the audit opinion, which we've received this morning, yesterday. The overall figures have not changed, but yes, I understand the frustration with the index and things like that, and that's the detail editing that we're constantly going through while we go through the process with the audit.
Thank you. If you turn to page 152 of the report, which is page 156 on Stella, you can find it, which is the Statement of Comprehensive Revenue and Expense for the year. It comes as somewhat of a surprise to me that when I see down there the surplus and deficit after tax of council was 1.617 million deficit, yet the budget was in actual fact $13.8 million profit. So in actual fact we have overspent $15.419 million. I don't recall any O&M meeting seeing figures remotely that bad, and I want to know why things have suddenly jumped so much. In particular, my question is, I see 2 figures there. Depreciation and amortisation expenses over budget by $3.5 million, and a loss on disposal impairment of plant, property and equipment of another almost $3.8 million. There's nearly $7 million just disappeared against budget there, which to me starts ringing alarm bells as to are we actually doing our numbers properly and actually budgeting in the first place?
Thomas.
So firstly, Councillor, obviously we are doing our numbers properly with the fact that we've got a clean audit opinion. I think as well as you may have cherry-picked some numbers there. So as an example, if you go back through my presentation, I have explained that hopefully, but I will go again. So first of all, you have put that total variance down to just expenses. You may recall though at a revenue line, and I did explain to you that there's $5 million of revenue that we didn't receive. So if you deduct that from the difference as well, the depreciation is a reflection of the revaluations that we took place during the year, not anticipated at the start of the year. The majority of that increase is actually a depreciation expense on our buildings. As you can imagine, our buildings have moved up significantly with regards to where that market sits. We do actually need to do a little bit more finer refinement with that number next year, and we anticipate it actually to come down as a result. And so that was an unanticipated one that obviously we need to take into account going forward. And the difference is actually the additional expenditure which the organisation has incurred, which we have explained to you and tied to those challenges that we've talked about. So I'll just reiterate, yes, that the budget did have us targeting a surplus. The reason why we have such a big surplus that we were targeting is because of the levels of capital subsidies that we were expecting, which we didn't all get, right? And secondly, we also exposed additional expenditure through to the challenges that we talked about. The two combined lead to that.
Which goes back to my earlier statements, which I've repeatedly said since I've been on council, that if you include your capital subsidies in your forward planning and they don't come in, you're totally out of kilter, and that's precisely what's happened here. But what is the 3.798 million loss on disposal, impairment of plant, property and equipment, please?
Could you go back to the question or the statement on the capital subsidies? Because we're very clear we're not a household here, we're a business.
We do have to include it as revenue, Your Worship, and budget accordingly to that, and it's used as obviously to fund our capital expenditure. I'm sorry, Councillor, I would like to think that I could have that detail on hand of what exactly that 3.6 million is, but my head can't contain that level of detail, so I will more than happily provide that to you at a later date if you wish. But effectively, that bulk of that will be as we renew and replace assets, there is a life left of that asset we replace, and so we generally write down what we replaced and replace it with a new asset, and so that will be the bulk of what that would make up with, but I can give you that information at a later date.
But there was no budget for it. Well, my question is, why wasn't there a budget for it if it's something that normally happens?
Yeah, and I think Councillor Stewart says, how can we? We can take a bit of an estimate, but we anticipate that when we replace our assets, they are at the complete end of their useful economic life, bearing in mind that we estimate the depreciation and we say that that asset will last 25 years and we depreciate it accordingly. As we all know, the world doesn't reflect that level of precision. So sometimes we actually do replace assets earlier because of deterioration, or they're attached to other assets that are completely failed or so forth. And sometimes we actually replace assets later, and they're actually, could be years past their useful life with regards to the carrying value might be zero. And that's the challenge that Stavros and the infrastructure team have. You've got to remember the way that accountants deal with depreciation and the way that the real world actually works with regards to replacing assets aren't quite in alignment at times. The depreciation and the useful estimated lives is the best indication that we have, but reality doesn't always follow that.
Councillor Gould, and then Councillor Stewart.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Thomas, for your report. Can you please explain which figures are correct? At the beginning of your slide presentation, you showed that the partnership was 190 million and the council cost was 46 million. And at the end of your presentation, you showed that the council cost is 40 million and the partnership was 193 million.
So good question, Councillor. You'll notice that I skipped past that second one quickly because those numbers were incorrect in that slide, shouldn't have been there, which is why I skipped past it. So the correct figures were the first ones.
Yep. You're showing that the general rates and targeted rates are 71% of income for last year up until 17-18. Is it going to increase this year or is it going to remain about the same?
It remains roughly the same, Councillor. You'll recall as part of the LTP discussions, we had a big focus on increasing revenue from fees and charges to try and change that percentage, and we did a little bit best, but as you can imagine, it also depends on how much capital subsidy we receive in any one year. So, but obviously the onus is, and what we're working towards is to try and have less reliance on rates going forward and more reliance on external funding and partnership and those sorts of aspects with regards to helping fund our infrastructure and our projects.
Could I just, the Chief Executive wants to assist here.
Through the Chair. Councillor Gould, one of the things I think you're alluding to earlier in your comment was the comments I made with respect to project expenditure, and I think Una also mentioned those same numbers. Those are drawn from the big projects that we're operating, which are large multi-year projects. The numbers that both Una and I were referencing were the multi-year totals, whereas the annual report contains only the expenditure within the financial year in question. So that's why the two numbers are different.
Third question, you showed that the personnel costs were 30%. Is that including the council-controlled organisations, the CCOs?
No, but Councillor, if you do wish to see what that difference is, obviously you can look at the group financials, and the difference between the council and the group is the CCO shares. Just remember the annual report itself is on the parent entity, which is the council. Yeah.
Thank you, Thomas. Councillor Stewart, then Councillor Merrick.
Madam Chair, I can see the headlines now. All the naysayers, the scaremongers and the self-appointed experts, there is a blowout in debt. Well, we've had it explained every month at my meeting and also at Councillor Rakawa Tate's meeting. The carryover of projects which the Chief Executive has just talked about, that some stagger over 2, 3 or 4 years. Sometimes we decide to bring projects forward. Sometimes we decide to extend projects out.
What's your question, Councillor Stewart?
Well, I'm leading to that because I want to make sure that there is an understanding that we've got money. Sorry, we had to borrow $21 million because some subsidies didn't come in on time. So we've had to extend to go higher with our borrowing. But this financial year, our borrowing will be a lot less because they have $5 million, etc., and there's other monies from subsidies from other entities that have yet to factor in, and that will decrease. So I just want to reiterate that I'm not responsible for, neither is staff responsible for, a blowout in debt. I think the $1.6 million deficit, whilst it doesn't sit comfortably with me, I think if the DHB had a $1.6 million deficit, they'd be over the moon, because theirs is over 100 million. And there are other private organisations, and you've seen it recently with the construction industry, how things are struggling. So I think performance-wise, based on page 29 and the risks and the issues that we've had to face, $700,000 extra on electricity. Staff expenses, the Sir Howard Morrison Centre, and the domestic waste volumes. But I also want to say that in order to add to our performance, the income was up 2.9 ahead of budget with rates, fees and subsidies based on extra activity that this council is now performing that are required and requested by ratepayers. The additional savings are also commented on there. So I'm delighted, and I thank you, Thomas and Chief Executive Officer, for the highlights in the report on page 28 to 29, and those will be the ones that I will be referring to ratepayers who don't want sensationalism. We want the real facts from the horse's mouth. And I think the live streaming, should anyone be in any doubt as to where we're at financially, because I know there is a sector in our community that will go out and say that this council is in financial trouble. It's far from it. It's in perfect condition based on previous years, it's particularly what we faced in 2013. So my question is, Thomas, are we on track based on the 2018-19 budget that we have already approved earlier this year? Are we on track to deliver that as per the budget? And what was our expected deficit in terms of that, which will now alter because some of those subsidies haven't come?
So, for you, Worship, I guess the question relates to what's going to come to O&M in about a week's time. So, yes, we are on track this financial year. We're obviously looking at our capital expenditure and making sure how we can deliver that. It's obviously, if you think that this last year was big with regards to 51 million, this current year is 77 million. So it is obviously a significant, a big year for the council and the community. Yep.
A lot of that 77 million is partnership funding, and we are expecting subsidy income from that.
Yeah, a good portion of it is, yes.
If, through the chair, if I could actually just reinforce a comment that Councillor Sturt has just made. If you take our projects, Rotoiti, Rotomā, Tarawera, Museum, Performing Arts Centre, Forest, and the lakefront, when you add the capital expenditure on those projects all together, effectively what you have is that for every dollar council spends, we get $2 of partnership funding matched in. From an organisational financial reporting issue, though, that creates a very large challenge because all of that money runs through our financials. And so the timing of when we receive partnership funding, the timing of when payments are made for contract completion, invariably they never perfectly coincide at the end of a financial year. And this the year just gone, and indeed I would expect the next 2, 3 to 4 years, you'll see this actually a theme occurring again and again. The key point, though, is that the financial projections contained in our LTP and our financial sustainability requirements are all still being met. But because overall we are on track for where we expect to be, what we will see is some fluctuations that result from these inflows and outflows that are due to these big expenditure items.
The experts from Fitch and from Audit New Zealand take all those aspects into account by giving their unqualified direction on our reporting.
That's correct.
And if I just add here that I've been meeting with Audit, with the Chief Executive on a regular basis, as is the requirement with the letter of representation and the statement of compliance that I'll sign later today. And it is a great relief that we got the audit opinion this morning. So we've been pushing, and I'm very pleased that it's come through. Are there any, Councillor Rokawate?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. It's actually been very helpful looking at the year in review. So thank you for that, and thank you for the presentation this morning. You know, when we look at the challenges, and there have been quite a number, they've been quite overwhelming, if you think of it, and it could have stopped us in our tracks, but we didn't, and we carried on. And the images that you put up, Una, thank you for that. Those projects, we shouldn't forget that in our community there are people who are depending on us to get on with the job and get those projects completed. And we tend to forget when we're sitting here, head down, bum up every month, during the month, you know, and we're signing off on different things, and that's a result. That's 12 months, just 12 months work. And so it's, yeah, it's just good to reflect on the year that was and see the mahi that has been done over the year. I heard you, and I appreciate the infrastructure investment and obviously the renewal investment as well. But I just wonder if we couldn't stagger it. I mean, I know I just heard you say it is about timing, Jeff, and that, but to see all of that in 1 year, and I'm just wondering, are we going to be staggering things a little bit more so it's a bit more manageable in future years, if it's at all possible? It sits more comfortably with me if that can be achieved, but I don't know whether that can be achieved because there's so much has been done in terms of infrastructure and renewals this year. I wouldn't like to see that carry on. So that's just a question, Madam Chair.
I think I'll defer that to the Chief Executive, who then puts the pressure on the Chief Financial Officer. Do you want to answer this?
It's the staggering of the project work is actually a difficult challenge. What hasn't been, we haven't spent a lot of time talking, for example, about the museum, and you would be excused if you looked out the window to think that very little was happening with the museum. In fact, the reverse is true. That project has very, very active project management around it, and a huge amount of work is going into at the moment, actually turning in the engineering understandings that have been gained into actually detailed design, and at the same time a funding plan for the museum is also being prepared. So the lakefront work, and comparatively, has actually moved a little bit more quickly than the museum building. So there is a staggering of the projects as a natural result of the very nature of the project that we're actually dealing with. The only way we could stagger things further would be to fundamentally delay for no purpose other than delay. And we have made the assumption that was not acceptable to you, and so therefore it's not built into any of our work.
Okay. It was a good question. I sense the work pressure. Councillor Tapsell and then Councillor Donaldson.
Thank you, Your Worship, and thank you, Una and Thomas and JP, for your presentation. The question I have is just on the big moves, and it's something that's very important to me, and that's affordable housing that meets needs. I see on page 84 we only have a small paragraph in there, and I don't really think that does justice to all the work that staff and council have been doing over the past year, particularly in ensuring that we have more housing that adequately meets needs and is healthy homes. And I perhaps just would like to suggest, and because we've recently had the announcement of Housing First, which congratulations to the Mayor and our council on that, and also the special housing areas, because the special housing areas have provided us with a framework where we're able to push that through a lot quicker, significantly quicker than we ever have been able to before. So just that suggestion that perhaps we could be mentioning a little bit more on the massive amounts of work that we've been doing to ensure affordable housing in Rotorua, and that falls under the big moves for 2017-18 on page 84.
I don't needs an answer. The difficulty is the year end, and all of these things have come after the year end. So it was, if it's an honest reflection of the year's work, that was the year's work. I think next year will reflect, you'll see much more of an impact on housing. Una, do you want to respond to that?
I'm quite happy to go back and have a look at that. I do agree, though, that there is potential to add more in around the special housing areas, the Housing First bit, because that is in this current financial year. We'd have to report on that. But I'll go back and have a look at that and see what more we can add in to show what has been achieved in the 17-18 year.
Cool. Councillor Donaldson.
Thank you, Worship. My question will be for the Chief Executive, and it's around organisational capability. As has already been mentioned, potential staggering of projects, and I'm mindful of the speech delivered by the Minister for Economic Development at the Regional Growth Forum, where he referred to all of the Provincial Growth Fund applications that were on the table, and he kicked some to touch and said why. But he was quite clear, and it all comes down to the 3-year election cycle that we work in. And so in terms of that funding, in his view, projects need to be of quality and be delivered with pace, because they need to see runs on the board. So that puts pressure on us as an organisation to keep our end of the bargain. On the flip side, we see national state high roading projects that have dragged on and on and on, and the whip's been cracked by this organisation in that regard. So unless there is commitment and pace, which needs capability, nothing gets done in an election cycle, and stuff gets delayed and it's never delivered. I mean, how many lakefront plans have we seen rolled out over our history, and nothing's changed? So my question to the Chief Executive is, are you confident in the capability of the organisation to deliver what we have going forward on the table?
So I think there's two aspects to the question, because one part of confidence and delivery is actually about our capability in this organisation to adequately scope, plan and monitor contract development, and to that end I am confident in our ability. Having said that, we are very much dependent on the contracting sector, however, to undertake work according to the timeframes that we're ideally setting. And that is something I think the Chief Finance Officer alluded to, that is actually still a risk for us, that the availability of contractors and the performance of contractors is something that we can't directly control, and is probably, if there's an area that I have got some concerns about, it would be that one.
Councillor Hunt.
Thank you. Just a comment first before a question, and it's a shame Councillor Rakauatate's not here. My issue about delaying and deferring actually fits in very much with my question, and we have spent this a very long time deferring maintenance on a lot of things in council, so we're playing catch up. Councillor Donaldson mentioned the multiple lakefront development plans, and how many times do we defer those? And my question really is, because of the historic or chronic deferred maintenance on many of our assets, are we yet at the point where we have reached steady state? And if not, how many years before doing the catch-up will it be before we've reached a point where we comfortably feel, obviously there are variations and unexpected things that happen, but that our maintenance and our asset management is on as steady state as something that is so volatile can be, because the issue of deferring stuff has got us where we are now. So just while that question, and just one final thing, just on page 100, and I will note it, it's very pleasing to see the increase in CBD foot traffic from 2016. This was a bone of contention for our community, and it has risen over 25% since 2016. And the whole point of looking back at the work we have done in the past is recognising that in 2013 that was a significant issue for our community, and the work we have done, this council has done and the community has done, has actually turned that around. So I would hope that that number continues to track, but 25% is impressive. So if I could just, and I know that's a long-winded question on the deferred maintenance, but I wondered, I think it would help people understand that the reason we're putting all this money in is because we sat on our hands for so long, and we cannot continue to do that.
So it is a difficult question, but I think it's one that everyone has an easy appreciation of, because when you look at the sound shell, you look at the sports drome, you look at the state of many of our public toilets, they just have not just happened. And it is not, the decay hasn't suddenly occurred in the last 2, 3, 4, 5 years. So we have got a backlog of investment needed into public infrastructure. That's absolutely true. We've got a number of approaches though to this, and one of them is firstly, obviously, to, as an organisation ourselves, as we have with the Okeraka work that you all know about in terms of the tourism infrastructure or tourism investment fund, that's a complete renewal, and that's certainly something that we are driving and will continue to drive. But at the same time, we are also looking to say, how can we do things differently? Because simply looking at the equation of expecting this organisation to actually do the same thing as it's always done, it's probably going to always get the same sort of results to some degree or other. So if you look at bus shelters, which is another area that we've got some concern about at the moment, what we're currently looking at is saying, how can we approach this differently? And it's exactly the same way as we're looking at with the parking system at the moment. We've got, as you know, the meters in town are somewhat dated, and certainly would require $2 million investment needed for those to be replaced if we were taking responsibility for it. As you know, in the last O&M meeting, there was a discussion with respect to a partnership in place with regard to parking, the parking system. So we're looking at the partner, in fact, taking responsibility for that. We're looking at that for bus shelters, street lighting, and a number of other amenities which we can drive a much faster replacement turnaround across our community than just simply having council do the work ourselves. So it's a combination of us looking to prioritise investment where we need to, like the Okeraka example, right through to our partnership approach, which will actually drive very different outcomes from the sort of asset replacement that we've seen in the past.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just picking up, I've got a question there. In terms of the CBD foot traffic figures, I mean, whilst we've got a 25% increase, isn't that a 25% increase on when the Manawa was all under construction? So maybe it's not quite as rosy as the figures look. Timing wrong.
It could be, Councillor, but also the counters weren't at Te Manawa. They were spread around, obviously, the CBD in lots of multiple locations. Yep.
Well, I just want to comment that I think this is a satisfying year end of the annual report, and I do congratulate you, Thomas. I've seen you really sweat the hard stuff And I don't think the paradigm of reporting against the old model is sort of working for us with the amount of partnership funding that is now coming into our district. And that's something that is not well understood out in the wider community, the benefits that we've got with that enduring and high value partnerships that we've got. And it just doesn't sort of stack up. So I'm awfully pleased that we got the audit opinion and kept the Fitch rating, and yet still managed to invest in growth and also our confidence as a district. So it's a very satisfying year end, and I think you've been very honest too about the challenges. The challenges, we won't always get everything right because so much activity is going on around us. I just want to say I was at the Visitor Industry Forum last night, and it was a very busy, big sector group, and everybody there said continue your confidence in investing in the big moves because they're good for us as a community and good for us as a destination. So I think it's a very satisfying year end. I take your point, Councillor Rotorua Tate, about staggering the amount of work, but this is clearly as year 3 in our long-term plan. This was always going to be the busiest year, and there are some unders and overs about our capital spending, as we always knew there would be. But we have to remind ourselves too that when we've gone out and consulted, that's delayed some timelines for the actual push start go on Rotorua Rotorua, and what a satisfying end position that is. So well done, and let's be honest still about the challenges ahead. It's a lot of work, and I think the governance comments in the performance reflect that our community want to see that we have a plan and we have a vision, but that we all believe in it. But we still can take the challenges from some that, you know, we need to do more work in some areas. So well done. I'm going to put the resolution 2, 3 and 4. I need a mover and a seconder. Moved by Councillor Rotorua Tate, seconded by Councillor Tapsell. All those in favour, please say aye. Contrary? Carried. Thank you. It's been carried unanimously. That's really nice. And well done, Thomas. I feel your tiredness. We now move to recommendation 7.2, the amendments to Rotorua Lakes Strategy Group in terms of reference. I need a mover and a seconder that the report amendments to Rotorua Lakes Strategy Group Agreement in terms of reference be received. Thank you, Councillor Tapsell. Second, Maxwell. Seconded. Councillor Gould. Thank you. Put the motion to the vote. All those in favour, please say aye. Contrary? Carried. Now, I can speak to this, to section 2 of the recommendation, because Councillor Hunt and I are your representatives on the Te Arawa Lake Strategy Group meeting, and this is simply a tidy up of the membership. And it came as a recommendation from Te Arawa Lakes Trust, who felt that with Tātobi sitting in the chair, it meant they had nobody sitting at the table unless they had 2 members at the table, and then that allowed for an independent chair. So that was unanimously supported by the Te Arawa Lakes Strategy Working Group, and I think it was a very good suggestion going forward, because there is so much work that that group is doing around lakes water quality. I'm happy to answer any questions, but it did go through that process. Councillor Stewart?
The status quo will occur, 222, Regional Te Arawa Trust, RLC, but the chair will not come from those 6. That chair will be totally independently appointed.
That's right.
I think that's a good move forward. I'll support the motion.
Happy to move. Yes, Councillor Rotorua.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to ask the rationale for non-voting. the independent chair to be non-voting. If you've got 2, 4, 6, 6 there around the table, and it might come to a situation where you do need a decision to be made, and it could come to a split vote, 3 each. So I mean, I'm just trying to. I would have thought that an independent chair could be voting, and I'm just wondering about the rationale. Could vote. I'm just wondering around the rationale for that. An independent chair would normally vote.
Yep.
So I'm just wondering if why that.
Good question.
Look, if I could speak to that, Councillor Rotorua Tate, that what we were trying to protect was the independence of the chair because he felt very compromised. We've never actually had, but you are right, there could be a contentious voting about allocation of funding. It would largely be around allocation of funding from the Crown contribution, because that's why this was set up statutorily.
I can understand the independence of the chair if they came from one of the identified groups, but if the but in this case it's not. So I'm just wondering around.
Could happen. Yeah, it could happen. Would you like us to take that back?
Well, I think
we'd
so.
have to
I just
bring it
wondered if
back.
anybody. I mean, I can see perhaps why they might have thought that, but to be an independent chair and then not voting, non-voting, and then have 6 people around the table,
No,
I
I
just
get
feel
your
it's
point.
it's perhaps making a rod for their own back at some stage.
It's no problem for us to take that back.
Be free all the time.
Thank you.
Councillor Hunt?
Having sat on that committee, in my memory, the only contentious issues that have come up have been left on the table and have gone back for the chief executives of both organisations to work through in order to reach a position where it could be supported around the table. And we have obviously MFE sitting at the table as well. I completely agree, it is a potential risk. But in my experience, anything, and there's only been one in the 6 or 9 years that I'm aware of, and a lot of debate happened, and then it went back to the respective councils to rework it to a position where the committee members could support it. So that's not necessarily a complete safeguard, but that has been what has happened in the past.
Councillor Kent and then Councillor Gold.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just wonder if it's possible for the chair to have a casting vote only. Is that feasible?
Well,
Because that would then mean normally they wouldn't vote, but in the case of a tie, they did hold a casting vote ability, which would solve the problem.
An option.
thank you for that. So we'll note the comments. We don't have to vote on this today? Or do we take the 2.4?
We'll move it. I think
It's difficult because we're going to slow down the whole process.
Yes, and certainly I wouldn't want that to occur.
Why don't we just delete the non-voting?
Yes.
Plus one independent chairperson and leave
And
the
we'll
voting
sort that
issue
out.
to be sorted out by the board itself.
That's a very good suggestion. Thank you, Councillor.
Thank you.
You move?
Ask a question, at the meetings, they're held monthly? Is it
No, they're quarterly.
quarterly? And they've always been attended, good attendance?
No,
All of them,
look,
yeah.
can I just say that this is the trust now really upping their game and wanting to sit at the table, as you see the CE, because the CE sat outside. And so they want to be at the table. I think the recommendation coming forward really reflects, thank you for that amendment, Councillor Kent, that reflects how we can make it an effective operating committee. Tanya,
I've moved, Madam Chair.
Yep.
Got a second?
have we got a seconder for that amendment? Do you wish to speak to that amendment?
Oh, yes, sorry. It was just a matter of clarifying the process to make sure that this is an enabling motion. Perhaps Una from Democracy Side could give us some advice just to ensure that by putting independent chairperson, we're not automatically restricting them to assert that they'll be able to incorporate that into their terms of reference as they please, and they'll be able to say non-voting or whatever situation they want. Okay, thank you.
It's silent. Yeah, because it's silent, it doesn't say anything.
No, but it means that the group
The group can make the decision, so that's fine. Yes. Yes.
And on that point, Your Worship, so if we left it up to the group, Does this committee operate under standing orders? Because standing orders allocate a casting vote to the chair as of right, so it sort of then takes it out of their discretion as to whether that's a voting or a non-voting chair.
Look, with respect, I think this is set up statutorily. It has to go through the regional council as the secretariat. It's great we've had this discussion, but I think as proposed and remains silent, then that committee can very quickly agree that as it stands is, because actually I've been a co-chair and I've jumped in the chair when Sir Toby can't be there, and that's how we've always managed. So we want to make sure we don't compromise the workings according to the standing orders, but we can refer that back. Have you got something new to add? Yes, Councillor Gould.
Madam Chair, I note that 2.4, the independent chair is elected for a period of 3 years. Does it mean with 2.2 and 2.3 that will change with the election if a different chair was elected to Barapiti Regional Council or a different mayor was elected to the Rotorua District Council?
Of course, we all understand that. They're not named.
They're not named.
It's the role of the office of the chairman and the role of the office of the mayor. That detail really isn't relevant to the recommendation. I'm going to put the recommendation, or the resolution. All those in favour, please say aye. Contrary, carried, and Una will reflect that through to the regional council. Thank you. Now, sorry you've been sitting so long, but welcome to the table. This is recommendation 3, Te Tato o Te Arawa annual report. Do come to the table, and I'll ask for a mover and a seconder to receive the report, that the report Te Tato o Te Arawa annual report be received. Thank you. Seconded, Councillor Hunt. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. And I have to say it's wonderful to have an annual report come from Te Tato. This is a significant first from a significant partnership.
Thank you. Tēnā rā tātou katoe, te koromatua, Steve. Me koutou ngā me mō te kaunihira. Tātou katoe hui mai nei tēnei rā, ngā mihi mahana ki a koutou. Ko tēnei te reporta o te tau rua mano te kaumā waru o te tau o te aroa. Nō reira, kei te mihi atu ki a koutou. Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the Council. Greetings to you all, and it is a great pleasure to be able to present to you our annual report. You'll note that it's over a 15-month period, and we've done that to align with the Council's financial year so that we can, in future, report in alignment with yourselves. I have with me Glenn Hawkins of Glenn Hawkins & Associate. He's our financial advisor and accountant and can answer any questions, as I can as well, on the financials that you see before you. A wonderful $167 in the black result. But it I'll take your report as being read, but what I want to do is actually just take you through our, can I have the PowerPoint up?
Just... Pardon? I just wish to note that 2 councillors, Councillor Kumar and Councillor Bentley, have left the committee for the presentation of this very significant first report.
Okay.
But we're very interested.
Your Worship, can I just thank you for actually noting that, please? That is actually quite offensive if there was no reason given for that. Thank you.
Ask a point of clarification. Did either member mention to you that they were leaving the meeting early or for any reason? Thank you.
Right, sorry for that, but do carry on.
Yeah, well, I should probably then start, Madam Chair. I mean, we've got the PowerPoint still coming up, but I'll lead into it. I wanted to give you a sense of where we've been, where we are, and what we want to do in the future. So just, okay. Look, I just want to comment on representation for starter, and the fact that we have always endeavoured to focus on being collaborative rather than combative. And the issue for us as the members of this community, it's in everybody's mutual benefit that we work in that way. And we have a very strong team that has endeavoured to do that and to apply themselves to teamwork, apply themselves to the issues on the table, do their homework and sit around the table and hopefully contribute in a very positive way. I note, and I'll say this, I'll note that in the Daily Post on one occasion, one of the senior members of the community commented on the exemplary behaviour and performance of our members around the committee table. And I really appreciate that and take it with all humility on the basis that we can agree to disagree. We can have our views on partnership and we can have our views on democracy. But ultimately for Tātou o Te Arawa, it has always been about performing, making sure we do and deliver of our best. So having said that, I want to go quickly over this particular PowerPoint that I've generated to give you a wider context to our annual report. Those two images are quite significant in our view. On the left-hand side is the patu that was presented, honouring Mauri Ora Kingi, and his son is here as well, Te Mauri, honouring Mauri Ora Kingi, but also really honouring the Mauri, an expression of spiritual connection and essence between our people, Te Arawa, and the community at large, represented by yourselves. So there was a very deep feeling and passion behind our intent in giving that. On the right-hand side is that award that was won several years ago in Dunedin, and it was a Supreme Award, acknowledging the work that was done on the partnership by Council. So together, we're hoping to make real progress by combining the sense of Māori and passion with the obligations you have as Council. So those two items in terms of this particular presentation are significant. Because if you look back at the future, at the history of where we've been, in 1993 a standing committee was first formed. I know intimately about that standing committee. At that time, I was the inaugural director of Te Puni Kōkiri who facilitated that standing committee. My staff did, alongside Manuhuia Bennett and others. And from that time and moving forward, it became quite obvious that it was relatively ineffective. Things happened or didn't happen and came to a head in 2012 with the Rotorua sewage case. I guess there were lessons learned either way. The simple fact is that there was an audit in 2013 on the partnership and a review undertaken, and then a release of the Rotorua 2030 vision. These things came together. And of course, what happened is Te Arawa were given support to move forward to look at models and options of models for partnership, and public hearings were held and over 2,000 submissions were heard. I'd have to say that I was very proud of my people and the way they presented their submissions at the time. It was done with passion, it was done with care, and it was done with dignity. And I think it set the template for the way that we can operate in this partnership, and we've endeavoured to do that. So we did march in a peaceful way to come together to share our sense of position and our desire to have a partnership together. And of course, we signed at Ohunamotu Tamiti Kapua in December 2015. And I want to read that last line in the blue there. This agreement embodies the intention of Te Arawa and Rotorua Lakes Council to establish an enduring partnership which creates a future that benefits the community as a whole. Not just ourselves, the community as a whole. And that's us, all sitting there in our glory with a great hope and for a prosperous future together. And this is the team. You know, they represent the rangatahi, the koeke, the elders, iwi hapu, trusts and incorporations, pan-tribal organisations. And, you know, it was held through an election process, well monitored and well run. And we got a delightful mix of characters and a good spread of gender, of youth, of age, and certainly skill. In that group, the other asked once, would we be able to stand the pressures of council? If you look at that group, there are four master's degrees. There's one who signed up to do a doctorate. There's an honorary doctorate. There's several scientists. There's a resource management commissioner. There's a international Toastmaster of high repute. And of course, our executive officer comes with exemplary qualifications in compliance and monitoring in regional councils and local councils. And we needed that sort of person to help us guide through this machinery of government. So what are the challenges for us? Well, obviously operationalising the partnership and having clarity around the role of our partnership. There was a time when we made a submission ourselves on the spatial plan, and it was a bit like submitting to ourselves. And then, of course, you end up zipping your own mouth in terms of what happens, and you're blocked of having, a say in some of the discussions. So it was appropriate that we took stock of that, and we looked back and we said, no, we can act as a portal for our people to muster themselves and be able to have and participate with capacity in any submissions that are put forward to the council. We wanted to create a shared understanding of partnership, making it intuitive. I know the Chief Executive questioned me one time when we were here doing a presentation, and he said, where do you want to see the partnership in 5 years' time? And I said, when I don't have to talk to you about partnership, when it becomes intuitive in your actions. And we work together. So, and demystifying the local government issues for us. I mean, we were lay people, coming straight into this in terms of around the table. We needed to understand the way the fabric of local councils work. And we got to that space pretty quickly. Managing the political landscape, as you have to do, the expectations of our people, filling potholes at the driveway through to give us a mower for the urupā, to very complex issues. We have to front them on a number of those expectations as you do yourselves in your work. Our teamwork, that was essential, and we work as a really good team. We've got a mixture of characters, one or two have a bit of a radical tendency, but that's good. Adding a bit of spice into it and not changing the characters, allowing them to be who they are, but recognising their work as a team has been imperative. Resourcing to deliver on expectations. You'll see in our financials, we run off $250,000 a year, including GST, plus the bit of extras that we can get. And we have actually done it pretty well, I believe, in terms of returning value. And I would like to think that the council believes that we've returned value for our time, not only around the table, but the way we've conducted ourselves on different occasions, and managing the relationships and tensions. So these are some of the advocacy issues that we've been involved with, the planning issues, and I saw Una raise those issues in our involvement at certain points in time with those planning processes. The wastewater management issue, that was an interesting one because it was in our second meeting, I think, in April 2015, when the decision came across the table about rolling forward with the waste management treatment plant. Tatou were caught between a rock and a hard place because we were new to the table. We knew that things were going to roll forward. We didn't want to obstruct that, but we needed the time out for our people to actually examine matters of Māori and those sorts of things. And thanks to the council, we were given that time. And as a result of that, there have been some fine deliberations on design work to actually develop a wastewater treatment plant that is acceptable not only to iwi hapu, but also to the community at large, I hope, and to the council. And of course now that process is through the consent, going through consent. And you see the range of other things there. We've been involved in some of the controversial issues with council. The aquatic centre, when that came along, we got squeezed against the wall on that one. But that's fine. We had the conversations. We had some of our members out front helping the council to front the issue. The housing issues have been a big issue as well. I mean, we all know that. The big moves, we want to be certainly partners in that space. We know that iwi hapu are right to the forefront on that, in those areas. And we don't want to, and one of our principles is we do not impugn the right of hapu and iwi to have their say. But we can advocate at particular times and at their request on their behalf on issues that matter to them. And we can pick up issues that aren't picked up by them and bring it to the table so that they have some commentary on those particular issues. And of course, Local Government New Zealand, one of our members, Gina Mohi, was appointed and elected as a member on the executive for elected members of Māori elected members on council. And that's a first. And that was an appreciation of, I believe, the standing of Te Tau o Te Arawa amongst other councils as a partnership model. And I want to congratulate not just Te Tau o Te Arawa, but the council for that. And we are getting a lot of approaches and inquiries about our particular model. And I know you are, Steve. So these are the projects that have been of particular interest at this stage for us. The Rotorua program, acknowledge again the unanimous support given by Council in August 2017. We raised an additional $87,000 from Te Puni Kōkiri to appoint a project manager, and we have gone through a range of these activities, the reo classes with the Council, digital information hub where people can find their way through the learning te reo. We've established the playground, as you know, Taikaka. Rotorua Business Awards recently at Westpac for the first time. A legal firm won that award, and the Rotorua entry signs. You know, the whole issue for us is how do we, over time, normalise the use of te reo? How do we appreciate the value of the place names we have here and the experiences, stories that come with that? How do we actually enable people to access it where in time it becomes normal? It is not actually seen as something that we need to debate and discuss. It adds value. It adds value to the experience of those who come in. It adds value to the safety, to the cultural competency and safety of our community, and so on. Where to for next for this? We want to actually I'll go back on that one. We have been pressured at times that we should move faster, but we have tried to move with a quality approach, with an approach that's consistent and sustainable. Yes, we can go out and help people everywhere, try and translate their signs, but we want to do it in a more meaningful way, where there's quality, where there's integrity in the pronunciation, in the presentation of the reo, where the macrons are positioned in the right way and people are saying it in the right context. So those sorts of things are important. What are we doing in terms of progressing further for Tatou? Well, we are working now on the Te Aroha 50-year vision. And why a 50-year vision? Well, that fits in nicely with the intergenerational changes. We know things like climate change and everything are coming up. We want to be able to be ahead of the game. We want to collectivise Te Arawa's thoughts on this. We know that iwi and hapu will have their own individual thinking around a 50-year vision, but we want to try and align and fill the gaps so that we can say on these critical issues, we all think this way. We all align to it. And so that's important for the future of our rangatahi as well, that we have this particular vision. So we started on that program now. It helps us also to align with the vision of the council and vice versa as we progress and move together. Again, long-term planning, that's things that we'll always be in support of. The whare taonga is an interesting one as you go through your deliberations on on the design and as things emerge. Of course, how does the taonga o Te Aroha fit and how are the stories going to fit in a revitalised and renewed whare taonga o Te Aroha? So we're in that space as well at the moment in part of the discussions that are occurring. Housing, wastewater management. We've been around the table with been able to facilitate connections with Stavros's team on this particular issue as it moves forward in terms of the major contracts and other things that are happening, because I think that's really important to have iwi engagement in that space. It's a long-term project and you want to be able to smooth the water, literally, not only clean it but smooth it before it comes to head. Our rangatahi. We are very keen to involve our rangatahi. We've made, I guess, small moves with the rangatahi we have on board with us. We've got Te Mauri Kingi and also Ngā Hui Hona Paku, who's on the flood relief funding group with the council. Te Mauri just came back not so long ago from attending the forum in New York on the United Nations Forum. He also took a trip and was invited and sponsored because of his involvement in IT and Digital Hub to Silicon Valley, and he spent time with some of the technologists over there. And this is our rangatahi, who several years ago was a very shy young lad, recognised the big shoes that his father had left, and he's creating his own footprints in the sand. So we're very pleased about that. But also, we in coming back from New York, very keen to establish a Young Te Aroa's Ambassadors group. You know, so we know there are youth groups going on, but we want to be able to coach and mentor our rangatahi in how to present themselves, not only locally, but nationally and internationally as well, and take the messages of our people and community out there, from a rangatahi's view, and involve them in the planning. So that's very important, and that's part of the succession planning, because a number of us are coming up into our fourth year, and 4 years, why, is because we had to take another year to align with the election cycles of council. And so some of us may not stand again, so we've been looking to succeed, so that it's not just just a sudden shock again and having to coach everybody else, but looking at for succession planning. There's a partnership review going on. We're bound under our partnership agreement to do that. We're a little late in the running on that one, but we're getting it done. So we're moving down that space as well. Elections are coming up, as we know, for the Rotorua Lakes Trust, and also Tatou next year in August, two months ahead of your elections. We've already got that all set up, and we're working with Rotorua Lakes Trust for efficiencies, to make sure that we can align with similar processes, given that our beneficiaries or stakeholders or shareholders in our space we have similar listings. And there's a research project that we're running at the moment with the University of Canterbury on town planning modelling. And that is, they wanted to do a research on how iwi can be engaged earlier in the piece on town planning models. And so come up with a mapping model that actually is basically a GIS model-based system that allows them to have an indication of how they might see their communities developing. This isn't to replace what the council has got, but this is to actually help build their capability and understanding on how their resources may best fit and align with not only their thinking, but the thinking of council moving forward. So, and that's a project that's been sponsored by University of Canterbury, and it's part of us going out to seek additional funds to do those sorts of work. And of course, partnership representation, we're called upon, as Steve knows, to represent at different times. We've been proud to be partners in the Local Government New Zealand Awards and being there. You know, I mean, both myself and I think he's that long-headed lout on the right-hand side, and Gina Mohi was there. Gina was sponsored fully by the Maruata Executive. Yeah. So she's there as a Maruata Executive. And I thank the council for the support of me being there. But during this time, you know, we've won several years in a row awards. And I know we've all been asked, how do you do it? And people are wondering, how does Rotorua do it? I was asked, and my view, my personal view, was that partnership matters. Whether it's with us, whether it's community at large, being able to exemplar partnership at the heart of what you do is an important part of this business. And I said, that's it. It's about partnership. So I was very happy to do that. So moving forward, those are the strategic priorities. I'm not going to go to them in any detail. I just want to thank the council for their support over the last 3 years. I certainly thank my team at for Tātou Aotearoa for the, I'll use the word, exemplary behaviour in my view and performance that they've contributed. I'd like to thank our executive officer. She's the sole operator of our office and business. And I'd like to thank Glenn Hawkins and Associates, and he's about to give you a very quick summary of our finances. And so for the $250,000 plus for the extra for elections, I would like him, and 167 end of year in the black result over 15 months, I'd like to ask Glenn, if I may, to present the financial report, then I'm happy to take questions.
We're just wanting to get your presentation up, Glenn. Wonderful to have a bespoke accountant beside you.
Oh yeah, I can take some questions now, then if you want, if it's going to take a little bit of time.
We'll start the questions. Councillor Sturt.
I've got some comment as well as some questions on the way forward. Mōreira e te rangatira no mai haere mai. The opportunity to, with the reo roa and being able to learn the reo. I know that Councillor Gould, myself and others around the table have taken that opportunity, and we thank you, and your support of those initiatives are huge. I think the partnership for me, and I had to be convinced to support the Te Aroha partnership ideal. I consulted Mōri Ora extensively prior to the vote and the submissions process. And it's through my relationship with Mōri Ora that I came to support the Te Aroha partnership. I was actually asked by the media yesterday, what's the highlight of your nearly 40 years on council? And it is voting to support the Te Aroha partnership. Because it comes to me as an aspect of mutual respect. What you talked about before and leading up to the creation of Te Tau Aotearoa was not only the festering issue of Rotorua Lakes, it was Taniwha Springs. There were a number of issues. And because we didn't have the right people, Your Worship, around the table at the right time, things never got done. The lakefront's a perfect example. Because the engagement wasn't there with the relationship that we have with the elected members of Te Tau or Te Aroha, because I don't see you any different to the Lakes Community Board or the Rural Community Board. Rural people elect the Rural Community Board members, the urban, the
Lakes people elect the Lakes exclusively. I can't vote for them because I live in Rotorua. Same with Te Arawa, they vote exclusively for their people, and I have no problem with that. However, you did highlight, Tataru, the relationship must be enduring. And it's got to be a living relationship. It just can't say, well, this is what we're going to do and this is how we're going to do it. And what I was delighted about with your presentation, which wasn't in our papers, was the Canterbury University type initiatives, where you're going out and seeking knowledge and how to be involved. Gina's appointment at Local Government New Zealand, etc., etc. One thing that has really impressed me as the chairman of the Operations and Monitoring Committee, and I don't know whether I was the senior counsel that mentioned it in the paper, but the calibre of the people you send along to contribute to the debates and the input at committee level is really appreciated. I'm sure Councillor Rokawa would echo my views there, and also my Deputy Chair, Tanya, would agree with that. And whilst one of them is a little bit radical, hey, I enjoy that. I enjoy that challenge. So for me, and I hope it is for you, Tito, is a work in progress. That you've got a lot of initiatives coming forward, which I'm delighted with. The other thing that I wanted to say, you highlighted the $250,000. Prior to the partnership, not having a Tito cost the ratepayers of this city millions. Not 250,000, millions in the Environment Court, because we didn't engage with the right people. We didn't engage with that mutual respect that now Tito offers us. And I thank you for that. And as I mentioned before, lakefront delays, Rotorua, Rotorua, Tanewha Springs, trying to bulldoze things through, cost this council millions. Not only, and as the CEO wasn't here at the time, but the legal bills and the embarrassment of the Environment Court was just horrendous. Things have changed, and Tito needs to evolve, as I see it. I think it was a great initiative to get it up and running, but I'm looking to the future, and I'm glad you mentioned in your presentation the succession that you have coming forward, and to have a report. I was so delighted with it. I didn't only read it once, I read it twice, because it clearly outlines your vision, where you're heading, and what you're going to do. So the question I have for you, you haven't left anything out of the report, or there aren't any surprises that you can see on the horizon. You talked about the challenges of housing and all those other issues. Papakaiing has always been an issue with me that has never really got off the ground, and I hope that that's one issue that you can look at seriously. Whilst other people call it social housing, this is Papakaiinga, which is unique to iwi in terms of developing their own land. So I hope you'll have
Is that a question?
Yeah, that's a question. Will you have a position in that space?
The short answer is yes. I mean, we will work on that space to facilitate appropriate outcomes in the context of our iwi people's involvement. You know, you nailed it, mutual respect. And we always want to play a fair part. We always want to have a position of equity, in a sense, where we've been heard, there's been a response, and we can mutually agree on that position. Not every time, not all the time, but we can most times do that. So yes, the answer is yes.
Thank you. And perhaps I'll stop the questions now and we'll get it to Glenn so that he can speak to his financials. Thank you.
Morena tātou, ko Glenn Hawkins tōku ingoa. It's my privilege to be here today to present the accounts to you. As our chairman has said, we are reporting on a 15-month period, and by chance the previous period, so we'll effectively cover 2 years today, is also 15 months. So when the trust started its activities, January 16, the trustees made the wise decision not to report on just 3 months, so we went through to March 17. So that's the first year you'll see. And then obviously made the wise decision this year to actually have a June balance date to align with council. So we have a further 15-month period through to June 18. So we are comparing apples with apples effectively. So given the reports, once they shrink down to include banners of the trust and various other things. The writing is relatively small, so I thought it might be easier just to have it up on screen for you. It's a relatively straightforward set of accounts. There's not a lot there. If we look firstly at the revenue that's been received, so obviously council funding, and that is a 15-month period in both cases. The blue bar, which is 2017, includes the election funding as well, hence the reason it's higher than the previous year. And in this past year, we've also had funding from Te Puni Kōkiri for the Rotorua project of $87,000, which has certainly helped. So income, up 14%, but generally speaking, year on year, it should be approximately the same, depending on any council decisions. In terms of expenses, effectively, like most organisations, we have people doing things. So there are a series of governors. So, the biggest cost at this stage are the governance costs. There's a breakdown in the accounts. The base fees are effectively $6,250 per trustee per annum. In addition to that, obviously, there's a higher honorarium for the chair and deputy for the additional duties. And we also have the subcommittee representatives who are also paid fees as well, and that's fully broken down in the accounts. So really, the major costs, as you can see on screen, are the trustee fees as well as employee costs. So again, people doing things, making things happen for Te Tātou. And they've increased from $61,000 to $97,000, effectively reflecting the full-time resource that's been needed for the important work that they're undertaking. Looking across, you can see the rest of the expenses. We have administration costs, which obviously includes our costs, any sort of office costs. They're incorporated there. The bilingual city project, which is the Rotorua project in the past year, was $53,000 in costs. We had election costs in the previous year of $40,000. But overall, there's not a lot there. And pretty much the Te Tātou get the money. We look after all the money within our banking system. We have internal controls and systems in place at GHA to ensure this safe stewardship of the funds, and we act on instructions from the trustees in terms of utilising those funds. So looking in summary, again, it's probably a little bit easier to read than the report you have in front of you. I have to correct our chairman, it wasn't a surplus of $167, it's $179.
We're better off. Another $12, thank you.
So, the previous year was around $17,000, this past year $179. So there's not a lot there to play with, really. And of course, they've achieved all these marvellous things over the past couple of years. In terms of our statement of financial position, or what we own and what we owe, again, there's not a lot there. Most of the current assets effectively offset the non-current liabilities, which is $125,000 in funding going in and out. So really there's a little bit of office equipment, a little bit in the bank, and some bills to pay at the end of our financial year. So it's pretty straightforward. So it is a relatively straightforward set of accounts. We've got a statement of cash flows as well, which is part of our reporting requirements, largely showing cash going in and out across those 2 periods of time. And as you can see, in the first year we had accumulated some cash, subsequently spent in the second year. So again, there's not a lot left overall, around $5,500 at the end of the last financial year. Yeah, and the reason for the difference in cash flow across the 2 years is really around timing of when funding was received versus when it was actually spent. But across the 2 years, obviously, there's effectively we've got $5,000 left, so there's not a lot there. So after that, in the accounts themselves, there's notes to the accounts, there's full explanations, there's line by line details around the specific numbers. But we thought it might be helpful just to put up on screen for you today. All the money going in, the money going back out, our surplus, albeit very small, and our current financial position and statement of cash flows. So I'm happy to take any questions you might have, Kia ora.
Thank you, Glenn. And we have a question from Councillor Rotorua and Councillor Kent.
Madam Chair, it's not actually around the financials. I don't see, I wouldn't have any issue with the financials.
Financials,
yes,
Councillor Kent.
Thank you, Your Worship, through you. First of all, I'd like to congratulate you on the presentation and the clarity of what you've actually presented to us. I think Council can actually take some lessons from it. It could also take some further lessons from the fact you've actually managed to operate in a surplus 30 months running, which I think would have to be a first for this council, certainly in the time I've been around. I only have one question on the financials.
That's not. I think we should withdraw that comment. This is a very small account.
It was said tongue in cheek, Your Worship, and hopefully taken with the spirit that it was meant.
Well, it does reflect. It's very difficult for council officers who can't answer, and I don't want their reputation impugned. Carry on. Okay,
I just have one question, and it's just a query. What was the building purchase in 2017?
Page is it on? What page is it?
Page 22? A $25,000 purchase of building. It's just
it would have been office improvements. Office improvements, yeah, to bring the office up to standard.
Thank you.
That was the arrangement with the landlord. Page 22.
Yeah. That's what we're parking now.
Yeah, well, it's a question.
Yes, good.
I'll start off straight away with a question. Can I congratulate the chairman and the financial reporting that you've given us, and Jude, the executive officer, for a thorough report, not only what you gave, Taru, but also for the financial report. And I wanted it to be brief, but other than to say thank you for providing a very, very clear report to us, and I congratulate you on the leadership that you all provide. Thank you.
Madam Chair, you may, Trevor.
Thank you.
Right. There appear to be no more financial questions, but now others wish to make a remark. Councillor Rotorua.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Morena Kōrua. Thank you, Te Taru, for the report. I'm not surprised at the quality. I know your background, certainly also Glenn, so I'm not surprised. Madam Chair, I just wonder if you could indulge me for a moment. Many years ago, I was a Bay of Plenty regional councillor, and at that time, our former mayor, John Keeney, was the chair. And we were sitting one day at council, and John said to me, leant over and said to me, Mirapeka, he said, we don't have the expertise around this table to deal with some of the issues that we are facing right now. And they were significant environmental issues, obviously with a heavy input that would be required by iwi. And he said, it is going to cost us in lost opportunity, it is going to cost us in goodwill with iwi, and it is certainly going to cost us in terms of dollars. And to cut a long story short, within a very short time, we saw the establishment of the wards. And so you can't hold back the tide. And what we have got here is something that suits us, Te Tātou o Te Arawa. It suits this situation. But I have to say, I do recall the rationale and the reasons that the Chair, John Keeney, gave at the time. And he said, we don't have the expertise. And of course, through their ward system now, they have the expertise sitting around the table. Through Te Tātou o Te Arawa, with the representation that we have on our operations and monitoring, and also on strategy, policy and finance, we have the expertise to guide us as well with our decision making, and also to get that iwi lens that is so important when things come before us on the table. So I just wanted to just say that you can't hold back the tide. I'm not surprised if all around the country people are, and I know that, trying to get in touch with us to see how can they do something similar that suits their situation where they are. But my question, Madam Chair, and to you, Te Taru, is it is around the 50-year Te Arawa vision, which I think is absolutely so important. But you and I know that we have our various iwi within Te Arawa who have their own strategic plans now, trying to plan for the future, for their mokopuna, the best utilisation of resources. So, and you did say those plans will somehow feed into an overarching document. So can you just tell me a little about that? Because, we've become quite iwi-centric within Te Arawa, and how are you going to cope with that, or is that not going to be a problem? Thank you.
You raise the elephant in the room is always how do you get Te Arawa as a collective coming together? It does happen. It does happen on occasions. I know that with land trusts and corporations, it's starting to happen in co-investments, creating scale, creating leverage of scale, and being able to but at the same time allowing those individual members who commit to that to have their own space. So the idea is to show and to lead, I guess, a sense of how do we create value by coming together, because we can do it. It's a huge challenge, but we can do it. How do we do that, that it allows the individual parts to do what they need to do without impugning that ability to do it, but actually supporting it, but actually find the space where there's commonality amongst those iwi hapu, their plans. They'll all have plans for employment. They'll all have plans for education. They'll all have plans for those social good elements. So I can see that whatever you come up with in a collective effort won't be too difficult in terms of the vision that they have in the next 50 years of building the capability of their people on all of those fronts. They'll all have housing in there. So the papakainga issues that you raised, Councillor Stewart, will come up. So what we're looking to do is how do we aggregate those points of commonality to lead to a 50-year vision. For land trusts and corporations with those major resources, they all face the issue, their primary sector primarily. And so how do they actually create scale in forestry, in farming, work collaboratively so you can have added value, constructs or infrastructures in your area to create employment. You can only do that if you're talking together. So part of the 50-year vision will be comments like that. How do we actually attain in 50 years' time a very efficient resource development organisation that fits in with the, I guess, the 4 pillars of our expectations in social, cultural, economic, environmental, and of course I could add in spiritual here as well. So it is a challenge, Councillor Rotorua Tate, but it's something that we believe needs to be done. If we do it, it will be a major accomplishment, but it'll be a successive group of people who will be engaging in that space, I believe.
Could I just ask you on that, Te Taru, because while we understand the aspirations of the 50-year vision that you are setting here, one of the issues that perplexes us as community leaders, and I'm sure also iwi, is this growth in inequality. And we see housing in here, quite specific housing and wastewater management, but we're all a little bit perplexed about where we can build resilience for our community and our people in terms of where the best investment can be made. Is that a discussion that happens with Te Tato?
Yeah, I think in terms of working on this 50-year vision, the notion of resilience will come down to leadership. Will come down to how we succeed people into these spaces. There is this interesting, I guess I come from a generation where we were still tagging on to the old people, a lot of the old ways. Yeah. The technology that we have now wasn't there, right? But some of the people like myself and Trevor and others around this table have seen that technological change and the change in leadership required to be able to manage that space, but at the same time not lose contact with who you are, where you've come from, and the ways of those old people, that some of them are pretty wise ways. So how do we bring the combination of the new technology and those ways that have been handed down to us, how do we bring them together in a new way of working and thinking? That is where you'll get the resilience. Now, are we talking about that? I think in the conversations around vision, we will find those leaders will come up. Yeah. And we've got, young Timothy over there with his head down on the computer right now. I mean, in the course of time, I'm sure people like himself will stand up. When you can go to the United Nations and stand up right now as a 22-year-old, when you look back at 3 years, that was never possible. But now, mentoring with people like himself, Tanya, all those people, they're the future leaders. If they can appreciate where they come from, they can appreciate the community they belong to, but they have the skills of modern technology, but a sense of the old ways, take us a long way.
So just on rangatahi, as you've mentioned, as a focus for you, are you seeing the links there with the Tuia Leadership Program? Because that's where I see significant investment back into the community. Or is it a different model?
Can I ask Timothy to make a comment on that? I'd rather hear a rangatahi voice say it than me.
Kia ora tātou. E mihi ana ki te tepu. Sorry. E mihi ana ki a koe matua oro waiwai, papa, eit papa. Hoi no tātou katoa e taunei roto i tō tātou whare. Just to talk about the TUI initiative and how it relates to the 2050 and what we want to do with rangatahi. One of the things that we need to understand when dealing with rangatahi, it's not a matter of what rangatahi can do, but what are we willing to do for them and continue to do for them. One of the examples that I could probably give is around foundation building. There's a saying and it says, you know, don't look at a young person as what he is. He can get worse or stay the same. But if we look at young people as what they could be, then they become what they should be. And so that's the initiative within the tuia idea. So tuia isn't the bird, the tui bird, but it's around connections and weaving. And if we were to take, for example, our tukutuku panels that are on either side of our pakitara here, each muka, or each strand is weaved in perfectly to make a beautiful picture. You know? And so that's the idea with the Tuia initiative, is to bring together different connections and build different relationships with young people who want to do good things in their community. Each of those strands will hopefully create a beautiful picture. And so that's the idea with the development of this 50-year plan with the rangatahi stuff that Tanya and I and a few other rangatahi from around Rotorua trying to do, and also, so I'm waffling on a little bit, but yeah.
Actually,
so there can be no rarere regarding the existence of Te Tātou o Te Arawa, that this report go on our website. I think it's an inspirational piece of work. It clearly outlines the vision, where they're heading, where they've been, and where we're moving forward to. So I just hope the Chief Executive and the Democracy team ensure that this is put up on our website.
so I think the right approach, Te Tātou as a partnership, if they approve of our use of their resource.
No problems, Madam Chair. Happy to support.
Okay, te pai. Are there any further questions? I had one more, because it is a burning issue for us all in New Zealand, is about climate change. And I see here where it's just not there, but is it there in other ways?
It's there amongst the iwi, hapu, the land trusts and the corporations who are leading discussions in that space right now. I know Te Rotorua Lakes Trust is involved in that space, so there's lots of conversations happening in that in the political arena, lower down amongst the land trusts and the corporations, and I know in communities how it's going to impact their community, so it's happening. Tatou, if we were called in to participate in that space, we'll do so. But as it stands, I think we're getting a lot of strong action going within the community as it stands.
Tanya.
Great, thank you, Your Worship. And just on that, actually, Gina Mohi was a guest speaker at the Local Government New Zealand Climate Change Conference, specifically talking about how iwi partnerships with councils can help to solve that problem. And I suppose just while I'm on the mic, just really congratulate you. This is something, when I saw it, I actually felt quite emotional about it, because for a lot of us around the table when this issue came to us, we knew it was the right thing to do. It was just trying to articulate the vision, what's going to happen, and the opportunity. And I recall saying on that day, there are three things that will come and go and you will never get back, and that is time, words, and opportunities. And in the short amount of time, you've provided so many opportunities for our community, and not just Māori. And it's been wonderful to see the Reo Rewa initiative that you guys have started, and how much that's positively impacting Rotorua and New Zealand as well. And even Indigenous communities that are looking to us here in Rotorua, like you said, asking, how did you do it? So just congratulations, completely tautoko your work, and can't wait to see what comes within the next year and next 50 years. So congratulations, and thank you very much.
I think that's an appropriate young voice that feels inspired about your work. Councillor Donaldson.
Yeah, I didn't have a question, Your Worship, but with your indulgence, I just wanted to make a comment on page 9 of your report, Mr. Chair. Te Taru, thank you for this report. It would be remiss of me under the paragraph on wastewater management if I didn't acknowledge the role that Gina Mohi of Te Tātou has played as chair of the Cultural Assessment Subcommittee that's helped to get us to the lodging of the consent for the discharge of recovered water as part of the Out of the Forest project. The right to discharge doesn't actually cease in 2019, it's 2021, but we have signed a deed. Unfortunately, it looks like the consenting process will take a year longer. That's been signalled to the forest owners, and we just hope that there's no erosion of the trust and goodwill that's been built up through this process. I thank you for the work you personally did, and I well recall your presentation in the temporary library on this issue, and some of how challenging and confronting some of that process has been. So thank you for walking with us on that journey in particular. Kia ora.
Thank you, and I just would like to also add just a reminder, and I think Councillor Rotorua mentioned it, or was it, about the previous things that we did incorrectly in the past, and the cost to council. Rotorua cost council $4 million. It was $4 million, the CEs advised me. And that's because we didn't do it right. Taniwha, many others. But can I just say, and as a woman, I don't have multiple partners, but this is a partnership that... but this is a partnership that I find very enduring. It's very challenging. Our meetings with Te Taru are challenging because we're trying to find the common ground that we can move the district and our people together forward. And I thank you, Te Taru, for your leadership, because you are a moderate, but you're a bridge builder. And a bridge builder is what our district needed after the terrible rift that happened over the partnership model. But it's not the words that you brought to us, it's the deeds that are now starting to add up collectively that give us all confidence that this can never be undone. And that's the aspiration of our council colleagues. So thank you for your contribution. Wonderful. Now we've got to put, no, we don't have to put anything to the vote, but we have had approval to put this onto our website. So now I need a resolution to go into public excluded. And could I ask, are there people that want to have a 5-minute break or get these items? Yeah, all right. So a mover, thank you, Councillor Rotorua, seconded by Councillor Donaldson. All those in favour, please say aye. Contrary, carried, and we'll go straight into the business as soon as the room is cleared.